Hey Internet, it's me. So tonight I watched the Fear footage. Um, this may surprise you to hear, it's a found footage movie. I swear to God this wasn't on purpose. Yeah, as far as this one goes, it's very forgettable, honestly. Not a lot happens. There was three individual stories and then one overarching story. It was an anthology film, like VHS, but not nearly as good as VHS. The overarching story is this cop was called to go investigate a house that reappeared. There was no house there, it was demolished a year ago, exactly a year ago. And then suddenly a bunch of neighbors and people on the street called the police and said, hey, this house shouldn't be here, but it is here. And so a cop goes to investigate, and then he decides, without backup or even confirmation from the department, that he's going to go inside this house and investigate. And then when he does, he looks around briefly and then decides to play a VHS tape that he found because, you know, cops are responsible, I guess. And then we start getting, the three interspersed short films. The first one is about a kid whose birthday is the following day, and he sees a news report about clown spottings popping up all over the country. And then a clown kills him and his mother, I guess. The second short was about these storm chasers. They're chasing a storm, and then they get murdered in the woods by cultists. And there's a monster, kind of. And then the third one, I just saw it. What the hell was the third one? Oh my god, oh, that's right. Yeah, the third one I really had an issue with. So there's this dude who moved into an apartment, and he hears noises out back, and, he thinks there's something going on. His girlfriend's like, oh, you're on drugs, so I'm gonna leave. Because the only excuse for hearing drugs in the woods, or hearing sounds in the woods, rather, is drugs. There's no wild animals or anything like that. Clearly, drugs. So the man decides to set up a camera and investigate. And the camera catches noises. So obviously, he uses that footage to convince his girlfriend that he's not on drugs. And when I say obviously, I of course mean that didn't happen at all. And he instead doubles down and decides to go out into the woods and investigate himself. And eventually, he ends up in an old church that was burned down because the pastor killed all the children that were in the church. And then the pastor reappears with a very stupid, off-putting, dumb voice that completely takes you out of the video. This is where my issue with this short is this pastor has like this, I don't know what you would call it, the villain of most slashers. Like, this is how you think their voice would sound. It's kind of like gravelly and scratchy and deep, and he just talks a lot, and he's basically monologuing. And for something like this that doesn't fit at all, this pastor who's like supernatural at this point and appears to have his eyes and ears and tongue all missing or whatever, he just starts this monologue with this dumb voice and just it takes you out of it immediately. Any tension or whatever that you may have had is just instantly gone. So I hate that short. It really, I don't know if I was like loving the film, but it was fine. I was watching it. But then when it got to that voice, it really took me out of it. It really annoyed me with how out of place and just wrong it was. But then that's the last short. We go back to the house with this cop who is, really starting to freak out. And he eventually decides he's just going to leave the house. But when he opens the door, it leads to a different room in the house. And he keeps trying the front door and then eventually other doors. And they keep leading back to rooms he'd already been in or different rooms from the last time, but never the outside. Then at one point he goes into the garage and he pushes the button to open the garage door. The button doesn't work, so he decides to shoot the button because he doesn't know how buttons work, because putting a bullet through an electronic device will not make the device work, it will break it further. But don't worry, his gun and bullets appear to be having no effect, and neither the wall or the button are damaged in any way. He then tries to shoot the garage door, also to no avail. Which, spoiler alert, if if you're in close proximity to something metal, don't shoot it. Ricochet is a thing. That's just don't do that. But yeah, basically the cop can't get out of the house and eventually he dies. And then you see this weird little, I guess, face. I don't know. You can't make out what it is enough, but something peeks around the corner and the film ends. Yeah, I know that was a lot of spoilers. I just want to get through what it all was. And it's not really that entertaining, honestly. None of the shorts felt like they really paid off. Like, each of them just kind of ends, not necessarily ambiguously, but they all end without a true climax. And then, the overall, the hub story, that doesn't really go anywhere either. Like, yeah, the cop dies, but we don't know why. We don't know, like, what do those films have to do with this house? Why is this house, or whatever's in this house, killing people? Why does it want to kill people? What started this whole process? We never really find any answers to any of that. Things just kind of happened, and we saw it, and I guess we're just supposed to be okay with that, but I don't know, it's really lame, it's really boring. There's no reason to watch. There's nothing that'll draw you in. There's nothing super interesting or climactic. It's just some events happen and you can watch them happen if you want. So, yeah, I don't know. I can't really recommend this one because it just doesn't do anything. It doesn't really go anywhere. And nothing else in the movie stuck out either. Like, none of the technical stuff. Like, the cinematography, I mean, there was no shots that were super impressive. There was no, like, framing devices or anything that were just really stood out. The effects were all kind of cheesy. All the monsters were just, people on stilts. There was a little bit of CG, like with the cultists. There was some fire. But you could very clear they had a small fire loop that they just kept reusing because it would, like, twitch. It just, I don't know. Nothing in here really looked that good. The acting, I guess, was fine. It wasn't, like, terrible, aside from the idiot voice on that one pastor. No one else, like, was unbelievable in their role, but they didn't have enough to work with to really impress you. Like, none of their lines or none of the story beats or emotions that had to hit really stuck out. So even if they were acting their ass off, they were doing it in a boring scene, so it just didn't translate to skill on their part. So, yeah, there's nothing here that stands out. There's nothing here that's really going to entertain you that much. It's not that the people working on it did a bad job. They just didn't do a good job either. They did stuff in front of a camera and they technically made a film, but they forgot to make it actually entertaining. So, yeah, I think this is where I'm going to end on this one. It's just kind of lame. Don't bother. There's definitely other things to watch. Hell, even bad movies would probably be more interesting because they'd leave more of an impression. This was just very meh. So, yeah, that's this movie. And tomorrow night we're going to do a different one. Okay, bye.